This is an interview with Leonard Harrington on March 21st, 1980. Your family has been in this area for many generations. Would you tell us something about the background?
Well, my grandfather, Harrington's grandfather, came to Akron about 1823, 4, 5. He opened up the first tavern in the village of Akron when all there was here was a flour mill and a general store. He was followed in that business by his son, who was my great-grandfather, and he conducted it for quite a few years. And then along came my grandfather Harrington. He ran a feed and coal business on Cedar Street for quite a few years. My great-grandfather on the other side was born in Indian Falls, lived in Indian Falls, he was born in Belfast, Ireland. I believe he was a Scotsman. He went to England, worked in the coal mines, came to the United States, to West Virginia, worked in the coal mines, and then came to Indian Falls. He had 7 sons, all big strapping fellows, and my grandfather Childs came to Akron when he was a young man. My grandmother Child's side, her father was the son of Jeremiah Hall. It's all right to make these mistakes. Jeremiah Hall, and Jeremiah Hall owned the farm at the top of Beale Street, which is now owned by Suttons. He had a house built up there, and I think probably it's part of the present house, but I'm not sure. The carpenter, he contracted with a carpenter who built the house. He moved out of a log cabin into that house, and the carpenter moved into the log cabin. I think that's enough of that. My great-grandfather, who was Hiram Hall, owned a stave mill, which was on the property now owned by John Capane. He lived in the house on the corner of Hart and Main Street, which later was owned by R.E. Robinson. While he was there, he invented a barrel-making machine and a powder-packing machine. He later went away and went to New Jersey, and we lost track of it.
I understand there were many industries in this vicinity in the early days.
There were quite a few. There were 2 stone crushers, the cement mills were running. The gypsum came later, and among them there was a cheese box factory just across the railroad down near Cedar Street. There were barrel makers. Oh, there must have been 8 or 10 of them making barrels. And where the button factory is on Bloomingdale was originally put up to make plasterboard. The late George Ralph sold the stock to get the money, and a man by the name of Craig Rose came and had the factory built. And it operated very successfully for a little while, but what happened, the gypsum company down Bloomingdale, the first one, installed a plasterboard making machine. Before that time, it was to a great extent, it was a hand operation and rather slow, and they had to put the plasterboard on little cars and run it into a kiln and let it dry for a number of hours. It was quite a slow process. The gypsum company's machine was a continuous operation. It started in at the beginning, and it continued with very little handwork until it came out the other end all dry. That's not bad, I think. I can just start out of it. I found out about my great-great-grandfather. It was in a letter written by a man, I think his name was Smith, to the Akron Journal in about 1911. And at that time, he mentioned playing with the 3 hall boys that lived at the top of Beale Street. And among other things, he mentioned the fact that he went to the Stone School on the corner of John and Church Street. And that is the first time I had ever heard of a Stone School. There. I went to the brick one myself.
What were the school days like when you were going there?
Well, I don't know. How do you mean like? It was something different. We didn't have, well, we went to school. We spent about 7 hours a day in our classes, that's for sure. And if there were any other activities, they had to be done in that half hour or hour, and or else afterwards. And a great many of them were done afterwards. There was one good thing. I think it was a good thing anyway. If you didn't get your lessons, you stayed after school till you got them, which is important, I believe.
There were no cafeterias in those days, were there?
The only one, if you had a lunch, you brought it. And I might add that when my mother went to the same school, and they had an hour off at lunch, and she lived a little over a mile away. And she came to school, went back for lunch, came to school, and went back home each day. My mother went to school at first school was at the Falkirk corner of Crittenden Road and East Avenue. And one of the teachers was Brigadier General Dennis E. Nolan, who was quite well known in 1918. And another was Miss Hurley. She later taught at downtown at the Akron School, and then she went into the Buffalo system, I believe. There was a big stone in front of that school, and they moved it. When Miss Hurley owned the house on the other corner, she had it moved over there, but I don't know where it is now. I think that's... When I was a kid, the mill was still running. You could get Akron flour. There was a barrel making place there.
The Falkirk.
Yeah, and of course then they raised mushrooms in 2 places up Falkirk. And there was a big store. It was Newman's store, and you could buy most anything there, includes shoes, cloth, everything really. And there were 2 refreshment places, commonly known as beer joints by me. I think that's it. I think I can say something like that. When I was quite young, the cement wheels still stood, but they didn't operate. There was one at up by the falls, and there was one by the tennis courts on East Avenue. The buildings were all there. The kilns were all there. The bridge up Falkirk was still there. And also, there were 2 stone crushers that were in operation, and they were our weekly and nightly play spots. Talk about risks. The dangers were all there, but they didn't close them up. And as far as I know, nobody ever got hurt. The 2 mushroom tunnels, one was run by, well, let's see, Harry Bell started it, and the other one by James Dickerson. And the reason they used the tunnel, there weren't as many insects, and the temperature was normal, or was constant rather, not normal, constant year round. The temperature was quite even in there. It always stayed the same, winter and summer, and that was especially good for growing mushrooms. And they used to get the sand and the dirt and everything and make the beds, and the process, they'd pick the mushrooms till they ran out, and they'd repeat the process. They'd tear the bed all apart and start over again. Well, they were quite probably, I would guess probably 50 or 100 beds in there of mushrooms, in the one that I used to get into the most. They shipped to New York, to Buffalo, to places in New England. Whether we call it a big business, no, I don't think you would, because mushrooms weren't a big business and they weren't generally eaten. And they were very high priced for those times. I remember them being, as much as $3 a pound. They used to ship them in $3 basket, or 3-pound baskets, pardon. And they used to ship them by express so that they'd be fresh. And the only place you could get them to eat was probably on the market, on a big market, or else in one of the hotels or place where fancy meals were served. Express, sure. Come on train so they'd get there, be sure. There were 3 or 4 trains each way every day.
Now, I understand there was a milk plant where Ford Gum plant is today.
There was a plant there. It was very small. All they did is take in the milk, and I believe they made butter and a few things like that. Later, they branched into ice cream, and it was purchased by Wheat's Ice Cream Company, which was, at that time, belonged to pretty much to the Sutton family. Then the war came along, First World War, and they got a contract to make condensed milk. And that brought about the addition that on the back of the other building, and that is the part of the building which is still standing. The front was taken down when Ford Gum took over. And in that, they had a condenser and a whole canning situation. They shipped the condensed milk in cans, which were in turn were put in wooden boxes. They made the boxes right there, and I don't know how many were in the box, but it was a good-sized box of condensed milk, and they shipped many thousands cans of condensed milk during the war.
The lower half of the building was stone, and the upper part was wood. It was painted red, and they had their name on it in white. And then years later, someone painted it all over in white, but if the sun hit it just right, you could still see the Dunham sign that came through and showed up there. But they made farmers to that. And then we had the Dunham came to fairs, and they used it just as a pound. They made stove grates, and when I was a youngster, they made manhole covers. They made this grating, heavy grating that the water goes down along the side there of the street, and the curves. Curve graters.
I used to watch them play walls. They had that play and everything. They did some pretty complicated work. It was very interesting. It wasn't like it is now. I could even watch them pour it. I didn't know they'd ever kick me out.
Yeah, the power of kids, if you kept out of the way, I used to watch.
Was it a strong skin shop in there too?
Yeah.
Big meal?
Of course, the best tin shops in Acton, one was over Harper and Harrington, they had the hardware store on Main Street. One there, and the other one was over the hardware first store that I.D. Eckerson ran later.
Part of the Eckerson.
Eckerson and Harrington. He had a man named Daly, a tin shop in those days. A village or a town just couldn't get along without them. These takers, they made stovepipe, they made tea kettles, they made pails,
He was on Main Street.
heat troughing and downspouts.
He was on two places on Main Street. He was next to the
Blacksmith shop down there too. Old Tom, I've been in there a good many, 4 or 5 times.
I think we're overstaying our
All right.
time, boys and girls.
I like to say something, everything has been about Akron, and you were supposed to have something about Newstead, so we come from South Newstead, so I just thought I can say that we had a couple things down there. I don't know, yeah, we had 2 blacksmith shops, as far as I could find out. We had well, first of all, on the corner of South Newstead and Buckwheat Road, we had the big hotel and the bar and the store. They had the dance room upstairs, and as far as I understand, they had to brace the bar when the dancing was going on upstairs. Because otherwise, I don't know. But Fred and Kate Schwarm supposedly got that. I have a picture of that from that was taken in 1892 that shows the size of it. It was burnt in August of 1936, and it was rebuilt. And then Eckner's had the store. And then my mother and dad took over, and it's the little one now. And down on South Newstead, where just south of Johnny Marachik's house, they had a paint shop, and that was by Charlie Cecil, and he painted signs, wagons, tools, and he was also an artist. And that building was sold to Howard Fix, and he uses it as a garage still now. I mean, I don't know much about these. We had a sawmill that was on the Reed's property across from Dorsch Road that made shingles and what have you. And down where Ed Carroll lives, that used to be Grove Palmer's house, that used to be the creamery down there. And that was from Ed Weingard from Clarence had that. And then eventually when that was sold, Fred Nervous from down there, he made the part from there. But that was sold to Wheat Ice Cream, and then it was all transferred to Akron. And I understand that's where Perry's came from, Wheats or something like that?
No.
No, well, is it 2 separate ones then? Okay, but anyway, Wheat took over the creamery. And then next to that, south of that, they had a blacksmith shop. And then down where Chet Babu lives now, supposedly somebody by the name of Fred Merrill used to store his thrashing machine in the barns down there. And that was owned by Schwarms. And then finally, John Cecil had his blacksmith shop down there. And that was in the early 1920s, as far as I could figure out. And then we had also Pottery and Kim's on North Millgrove Road. One was supposedly on the corner of Nice Road, and the other one on the corner of Hiller Road.
Did they use the clay from right around there?
As far as I know, they did, yes. And then down in Millgrove, the Ceases had one right in the yard.
Does anyone have a piece of that?
May Smith has some of the Ceases pottery.
Yes,
She has quite a bit of it by the sound of things.
It would be interesting, I'd like to see some of that.
The Rochester Museum had an exhibit a few years ago, and they put out a catalog. And on one of the pages of the catalog, they show a picture of Johnson's pottery from South Newstead. You remember a couple of years ago, we had Mr. Spear and his wife here on glass, and he asked me if I knew anything about a pottery work, and Jim was here, so nobody seemed to know anything about it.
Well, see, on the corner of Nice and North Millgrove, there was a quarry there, a hole, and that's where Bob Blumen has his house built, where that hole is.
Apparently it was a short life,
Was.
but it went long enough, so it got into the catalog. Anyway.
The Ruby Stuber gave me a couple pictures, and she's got the one of the Akron Plastic Board Company, but she also has one of the Akron Manufacturing Company. What did they do there?
Where was it located?
I don't know. I just got
What's the
the
name of it?
Akron Manufacturing Company.
That's a button track.
Let's see.
It doesn't look like it, it's a different building though. And then,
Oh, yeah, that's the button. Yeah, that's the same thing.
That's the button.
is it?
That's the one that burns.
Oh, that's the original one that burned? Oh,
That's the
okay.
original button.
Now, this building here was plasterboard. No,
That was built for about,
well, then where was the plasterboard?
right there.
Oh, that 19 liter. Oh, the last
They made buttons out of,
Oh, the old nut button. That's right. The Akron Manufacturing Company made nut buttons, not the kind of buttons that they made in recent years.
Nut buttons, you mean
Nut.
buttons for dresses and for clothing? That kind of button?
It was a brown nut that they cut and polished, didn't they?
Yeah, I guess I've seen those somewhere. Come to think of it, I can remember.
The map, and they used a teasel. You know what teasel are? People go out in the fall and collect them now and put them in dry arrangements. The teasel heads seem to be just ideal for looking sort of map. And they brought in fuller's earth. We didn't have any around here. It appears that it was brought in from Europe. This earth was put into, it wasn't a solution because it didn't dissolve. It was a mixture of water, and the little cloth was put in there and firmed it up. Well, then they took this wet cloth out, stretched it over frames and hooked it on frames. And they call those tender hooks along the edge. You've heard of being on tender hooks? That's where the expression comes from. And that mill, that carding and pulling mill, lasted until 1832, 1850. And it was in the Akron Falls Park area down there in the gully. So they had a good supply of water.
It was in the gully?
Yeah, in what, that flat area near the creek in there. That area.
There had to be, I think probably when it was the one found on the
Yes, in that area where
It was
they
there.
mentioned the Jebs.
Well, and I know right where it was. It was where the Cummins Lane used to go, just as they entered the park. It was on the right of that lane. And the tunnel that carried the water with the power was, we don't know about from here, that wall was still there. We used to go in it when we were kids. I mean, there was still stone walls of the building were up high. That was
Company locating it east and west would be, say, over the hill where Albert Street was, or
It would be
Parkview
down,
Drive,
it would be down in the.
right below that.
Cummins Lane used to start at the top of Albert Street. And went down and went around a big wide curve. And, no, went down this way, turned back a little, then it went down around, and then it came around this way. Down there it was at the bottom.
Would that be near the lake?
It's at the end of Albert Street.
Yeah.
Albert Street,
Bridge? You mean by the bridge?
don't know, Parkview Drive. That Parkview Drive up here was Albert Street. Parkview Drive didn't exist. There was no street through there. And there was no bridge and there was no dam. There was a toboggan down there. Nice, with a track and everything. They made it melt too often. They couldn't keep a solid one.
Then in 1829, a man, his last name Wisher, Whicher, started a grist mill down in the Mill Street area of what is now the village. later went from this gentleman to John Widener. John Widener's son, Zero,
Yeah.
George Widener. Widener either sold it or from his estate he went to a man named Coon. That grist mill. Now, you see, that grist mill it was run by water power. There was a stone dam across Murder Creek. Oh, you know where Clark Remsen lives on Mill Street? Almost the last house on the west side of the street, the left hand as you're going down. The back of his house is a stone dam across. And it backed the water up quite a ways. And they had a race. They took the water off. Well, looking at the map, it looks to me they took it off about somewhere in the neighborhood of where the Akron Fire Department has its building. They ran down Mill Street. There was a bridge across Mill Street and you crossed the race. That was the head race. And the tail race went on down into Murder Creek. And of course, when the New York Central or West Shore Railroad came through, they crossed the tail race and they built a beautiful culvert. Still there today. They don't build culverts like that anymore. It's made out of cut stone, granite, nice arch roof. The stream, there's a stream still running there, but it's not from the mill race. It was back in the 70s or 80s, the dam went out with a flood and they never put it up again. They covered and took the tail race into Murder Creek. 1840, gentleman Jonathan Delano started the manufacture of water line. That was a type of cement. I think that's the same type of cement they made over Louisville Cement Company called it natural cement. Took our cement, took our rock here, and burned it, and killed. I'm assuming in those days they used charcoal. I'm assuming they did. There was so much wood. There were people that had that expertise and knew how to make charcoal. At one time, was quite a business, charcoal. Later, of course, we know they use coal.
You'll see there's many, not many, but there's places around yet where there's remains of an old lime kiln that was on an individual farm, where they probably did the same thing, took the rock and burned it and made their own cement. There's one on North Millbrook Road that I know of.
Does that bring us up to 1850?
That brings us to 1840.
1840.
In about 1840, a man named Montgomery got a hold of a piece of rock that someone said an Indian from. Pulverized it, burned it, and it turned out to be an excellent form of wine. Put on the soil, and that amazed me. I thought that sweetening up the soil, bringing the pH level up like farmers do today, continually to be able to grow certain crops. You want your soil at the right pH level to get away from the acidity. But here they were doing it back, it must have been done before 1840, because here a business sprung up. Montgomery made a deal with the Indians, and they brought this rock up from the reservation. And Unions got into it, and then later the Communists. And they found they could get the same rock up here in what we call Falkirk, by tunneling. That was the first mines. They started tunneling. Before this time, the Delano, with his manufactured a water line up at Falkirk, you come right from the surface. It's pouring. If you live up in that area, you know the rock comes close to the surface, and you don't have to get out there and that business continued until 1860. In 1870, they started the first tunnel. They started real mines that we know of, and some of them were still in existence up there. We still get back in. So, there you are. I brought you up to 18.
Well, the latter part of the 19th century was also a busy time around here. The people kept improving, having to build other things, because if you make lime or rock, grind it all up as they did for this, you had to have something to put it in, didn't you? So what did you do? You made barrels. We got lots of lovely trees, so we had that kind of thing. We had other industries starting up that helped with the transportation that Gladys mentioned before. So maybe we can get into the late 1800s and see what we can find. You have something on that that'll help us, or are you later? Oh.
We have at least 3 state mills.
Now tell them, I know.
They're on that map over in that book. I
State.
know it found it out. I didn't realize it was in there when I looked. Well, about in John Pecan's Drive, and H.P. Hall and Stave mill. H.P. Hall there? No, he's my great-grandfather.
Oh. It's all over the
He must be. And his father owned the Sutton Park. And he built the house, the original house. This is interesting, I just found it. He had a man build a house on it. He moved into the house, and the carpenter moved into the log cabin, and he moved out. And I've often wondered where I knew he had a mill. I didn't even know what kind it was until I looked at that map there. I didn't realize it was on it until a couple of weeks ago. And I often wondered what kind it was. I wondered where it was. Well, there it is. It's in John Pan Jog. And he lived on the corner across from Huey Bernard, where Arlene Robinson used to live. That's one thing I can tell you. Oh, incidentally, Kelsey, too, there was I think that mill race went to 2 mills. I think it divided. Looks to me on the map like it went across over the hotel at the end of Main Street. And it went down there and there was another mill down there. It was an apple dryer when I was a kid. I don't think it was made for an apple dryer. I don't know what. That might be on there. I don't know. Do you think it was?
Yes, of course, they didn't use any millers. They didn't use it.
Well, it may the building wasn't built for that. It may have been a mill before. I don't know. I may be able to tell you later. Should I read this? This is all the business. This was published in 1900. And it recites the businesses in Akron that the G.A. Kent knew about. He lived here when he was a boy. You want to hear?
Sure. This would be all the ones that were in the late 1800s, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's fairly long, and I'm not the best reader, so bear with me.
A little louder.
Oh, louder. In no recording, I do not say. That's what Mr. Kent said. I see you. But of Akron I will speak. It's a town of modern size, stores all laden with supplies. There's 2 banks for you to use, 2 newspapers to peruse, 3 cement works men employ, 2 parks where children play with joy. There's 2 railroads enter town and 9 hotels of renown. 7 churches and 1 high school to help you reach a higher goal. There's 1 opera house for pleasure where actors and musicians gather. Natural gas for lighting heat, city water protects every street. Firemen of the volunteer, they are heroes when danger's near. Here the mushrooms they grow, sold throughout the state you know. If of oil you require more, branch of Standard near West Shore. Boiler and wagon maker too, and 5 blacksmiths tried and true. There's a foundry and flour mill, and in summer a bike hospital. Now to capitalists perchance, you will help Akron to advance. There's Flint's department store, groceries, and dry goods galore. Newton or Buckley too will be pleased to wait on you, and Mort Daly as well, the merit of his goods will tell. There's Spooner, also baked, always have the choicest steaks. R.S. Mills the jeweler, deals in gold and silverware. If it is furniture you need to make your household shine, Jones the undertaker will be pleased to see you anytime. Burns Furniture Emporium, wish your attention for a while. He also handles paint and oil to keep your house in proper style. If piano or organ you desire of Mr. Sheffield, please inquire. Robinson or Flint with ready-made clothes or furnishings wish your trade. Anderson the tailor too makes suits to order that will fit you. If millinery you require, Jackson may have what you desire. Dunnett and Company too will enjoy a call from you. Charles Parker is up to date in exchanges of real estate. Perhaps you wish flour or peas, Grace can supply your every need. Harrington, he's my grandfather. Handle coal, feed, and grain. Call once and you will call again. Bauer Brothers in the lumber line, also coal that is extra fine. If your footgear needs repair, Mr. Doris is always there. Zimmerman's Restaurant takes the lead. Come and enjoy a first-class meal. Andy, Havens, or Thomas too, with shave or haircut will please you. There is the Akron Hardware Store with their wares filled to the door. Barnabas with his variety line to make a bargain, now's the time. If cigars you like to smoke, King's Boom or Monarch are no joke. If you want your plumbing done, send word to Stearns and he will come. The Akron laundry, so to speak, gives you clean clothes twice a week. Perhaps your supply of drugs are gone, call and see Charles F. Burkmore. Or of baked stuffs you are shy, Rushbrook will you supply. And the Thomas Brothers too, there are lots of things that will please you. Wilder or Hurry sell cream and milk of quality that is fine as silk. And for sickness or for pain, Max, Parker, and Helwig live on Main. Go to Cummings or Ford for insurance, either they helper for endurance. Or a photo you might say, go to Lynn's without delay. Foster, Parker, or John Dodd have their livery steeds well shod. It may be pleasure that you seek. If so, preamble down the street, that it is the bowling alley. Mr. Tucker keeps the tally. Perhaps there's some that I have missed, and some that thou at their request. To have all appear was my intent. G.A. Kennedy. I didn't think many of you would.
This is certainly a good picture of the variety of things that the townspeople had gotten into this time. Do you have anything more to add to that?
1894. They forgot the Akron Foundry, didn't they? You know it there. And the foundry down on Mechanic Street.
True. Yeah, he had that then.
1909 map shows the beginning of the gypsum.
It started once and they quit. Now, and it filled up. So let it fill up with water. I'm gonna, let me think.
Forrest will pump that out.
Yeah, I know it. He came here, Forrest came here about 1911. Yeah, 1911, and I would say within the first year, he pumped out, so it started again about 1911, 12. He and another man went together and they pumped it out, and then they bought it, I believe, because, and they got the water out of it. That was the big problem. And they got the water out of it, and then they sold it. Part of Mr. Forrest was started with that. But when he came here, Mr. Forrest didn't have, I don't think he had anything. Perhaps.
My wife's father helped Forrest on a pumping deal.
If you go upstairs in the room, up on the plate, you'll see all the signatures of the carpenters that work for Matt McCann and Rudy Drachenberg and they all signed their name up there.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's up there. I've been up there. I've been up there. You look, you'll see them up there.
Branson lived where the bowling alley was, probably. I know Irma lived there. Actually, house was, next to where the bowling alley was, where the pizza place is. That's where Irma lived when she was there. Branson may have moved around the corner on Buffalo Street. I'm not sure either. That's where I got.
John told me that I.D. Eckerson lived on Buffalo.
Yeah.
Well, I know he did that.
Next to the Odd Fellows Temple, I think.
Yeah.
But he also, oh wait, he also lived on Main Street.
Yeah.
Used to be down in the village.
I don't doubt it.
Well, your uncle was the walls, the dam there. He borrowed it.
Yeah.
Paddling around on the middle of the pond dam, and got lost control of it, went over the dam. Sure, and my dad told me, things like,
She's not my aunt. Oh, I can't find Frank.
that's right.
I'm sorry. Frank's not my aunt.
That's right.
She's my uncle's sister, but.
Oh, 1909, there was the Ashton, men named Ashton Weston who started the apple dryer. That was down by the railroad track at the foot of, the old building stood for a long, long time. Evidently, they had, in the basement of the building, they had some kind of contraptions there where they started fires and they burned sulfur, the old barrels of sulfur. The sulfur was in sticks about that size and about that long, right yellow. And they must have had flues that they conducted the fumes up to the second floor, because that second floor was all slatted. On the first floor, and they moved out and left all the apple pears and everything there. There were these machines that pared apples. Now, I don't know whether the machine sliced them too, but up above they must have spread them out. And then you see the sulfur dioxide bleaches apples. They don't turn brown. You ever seen the old-fashioned type of apples that were dried at home in the oven or on top of the stove? You get pretty brown. They look like little hunks of shoe leather.
I was in a dryer once in Basil, and that, I don't know anything about what they did with apples, but I went in there one night, me and a couple other guys, and the floor was all full of slats.
Yeah.
And you should have seen the fire they had down there. And the stove, just one big, and it was a big room up the top, and it was all covered with those apples sliced about. It's the only time I was ever in there. See, I used to live in basement.
Old-fashioned mischief.
They used to take a shovel up there and turn them over.
How did they keep them then?
You know, they keep them sharp.
You know, I mean, what'd you do, pack them in boxes or kegs or crates or what?
Used to be able to buy them for a pound in stores years.
So a lot of that stuff used to be shipped in barrels.
Oh, there's your barrel, your stable people again, huh?
Barrel making was very big.
Cooper shop.
There were at least three slave mills. And when I was very young, down on, across the railroad, back in where the power company, that garage for the power company, just beyond there, just east of there along Morgan Street, they were making barrels. I watched them. They used to put them together and put them over a stove. They had a round stove that fit inside the barrel. And what they would do, they put all the staves and put them the right size. And they put the iron ring band, we call it,